On my way to Yom Kippur this year, I was searching my experience for a story to tell you, some big mistake or failure that I could talk about, some huge sin. And I noticed two things. First of all, there was no serious crime to report. I really, thank God, no gigantic, obvious, singular failure leapt to mind, but there were lots of little ones, lots. And that's the second thing I noticed. When I went to toss in those crumbs at Tashlich, the list of smallish mistakes was so endless that I quickly lost track. They blend together into bigger categories, neglecting my physical health, losing my patience with the people I love. There may be sparkling examples of each category of my failing, but each seems to have an infinite variety of expression. Over time, I have explored the variations in great depth. How many ways have I lost patience with my family? Many. I have done it loudly and seethingly. I have shouted, avoided. I've said things that were unkind. I've rolled my eyes, 1,000 ways to behave badly when losing patience with my family. In my experience, it's not just a singular mistake that takes me off the righteous path. More often, my mistakes are patterns of behavior and thought that repeat themselves over and over again, bad habits. This has implications for how to go about changing myself for the better. Now, before I go any further, I want to make it clear, if it's not clear already, I am no expert on defeating bad habits. I've overcome a few in my life. But the real reason I'm talking with you about this today is because I'm reminding myself of the lessons that I too need to learn. Some of the best Jewish advice about recurring patterns in our behavior comes from a tradition within Judaism called Musar. We mentioned it last night. I know some of you have been studying Musar for a very long time, but it might be new to some of you here. And today's most well-known Musar master is probably Alan Morinus, whose book, Everyday Holiness, I highly recommend. At the beginning of his book, Morinus reframes our habitual struggles, those patterns of small recurring mistakes, as a customized curriculum, a unique set of lessons that each of us has been assigned to master. He writes, "What I'm calling your curriculum shows up most clearly in the issues that repeatedly challenge you. I'm talking about the behaviors that dunk you in the same soup time and time again. You could probably identify one or two of these patterns without much effort in a string of soured or even broken relationships, in financial dreams that are never realized, in fulfillment that is forever elusive. But despite your experience, you may not have realized there is a curriculum lying embedded within this personal history. The sooner you become familiar with your curriculum and get on with mastering it, the faster you'll get free of those habitual patterns. Then you will suffer less. Then you will cause less suffering to others. Then you will make the contribution to your world that is your unique and highest potential." So says Morinus. So these bad habits of mine are not just unwanted flaws. They're here to teach me something, to be mastered and transformed. Thank you, God, for the abundant opportunities to learn. Musar is too broad and deep to summarize here, but I want to lift up two fundamental ideas that underlie its vision of personal transformation: mindfulness and freedom. Mindfulness and freedom. To put it simply, in order to change for the better, we must first become honestly aware of our shortcomings. We talked about that last night. And then to learn to make a different choice the next time we find ourselves in a similar situation. A little harder, that one. The miracle is that we're actually free beings, unbounded by the past, and it is possible to retrain ourselves over time. That first step, becoming aware, it's not as easy as it might seem. There are obstacles to overcome. the pride that defends us from seeing our flaws, the busyness that distracts us from paying attention. Many are the forces that would keep us blind and asleep to the truth of our own behavior and its impact on the world. The good news is mindfulness is a skill that we can practice and improve through spiritual practice of various kinds, meditation, prayer, journaling, many others. We can develop an inner witness who begins to see the chains of cause and effect both within ourselves and in the world. Marinus and the Musar tradition call this cultivating sensitivity. He writes, sensitivity means being aware of the seed of a thought, word, or feeling, or deed as early as possible in its germination and birth. The more acute your awareness of what moves within you, the earlier you will see what's arising, and the more you will have the choice over the course that that inner impulse will take. Over time, cultivating sensitivity teaches us that we are more than our thoughts, more than our cravings and aversions. It turns out that science has affirmed this spiritual insight. In his book, Unwinding Anxiety, Judson Brewer shares successful science-based treatments for bad habits of all kinds. And there's even an app. He's created an app. If you're trying to quit smoking or overeating, he has an app for you. So he would say that change is not just a matter of brute willpower. Habits lodge in our minds and our bodies in places where conscious will has little control. To change, we first need to notice our habit loops, patterns of thought, feeling, behavior, impact. Brewer writes, when we notice and note the physical sensations that are arising in our body that make up a craving, we are already less caught up in it, simply through observation. Brewer recommends bringing a certain practice to moments when we notice a bad habit arising. It's called RAIN practice. RAIN is an acronym. R, recognize, and then just sort of relax. Oh, here it is, but I'm not gonna go freak out about it. I'm recognizing and relaxing. Then accept, A, allow it to be. Don't fight it too hard. I, investigating, and especially investigating the bodily sensations that go with this impulse, but also thoughts. And N is for noting in a way that you can learn and remember. So that's just sort of after the fact, thinking about it, trying to bring into your consciousness what the order of the steps are. What are those little patterns? Sensitivity, though, is not just about internal awareness. There's also a matter of paying attention to the things outside of yourself. If you notice that a certain circumstance triggers you, you might want to reduce your exposure. So for alcoholics in recovery, avoid bars. Don't go to a party where there's a lot of alcohol. If you're addicted to your phone, anyone addicted to your phone? If you're losing sleep, charge it in the kitchen at night. Don't put it right in it. Get an old-fashioned alarm clock. There are things you can do to your physical environment, right? So I'm happy to say that over the years, I've begun to cultivate my awareness of my patterns, but I've also noticed that awareness itself doesn't necessarily change anything. Sometimes it just makes it a little more excruciating, as if in slow motion. Here it comes. Elevated heart rate, pounding heart, harsh judgmental thoughts. Yes, I am definitely losing my patience. And there it goes. And I know that he didn't mean to push my button, but he did. He pushed it, and here comes my defensive reaction. And there, my voice is raising, and now I'm yelling, and oh yes, here we are again, and I'm definitely not acting from my highest, most enlightened self. Again! I'm aware! I am aware! Ouch! Awareness is just the beginning, it turns out. Once a habit is in full swing, it may be all we can do to watch and cringe. Luckily, Marinus has further advice. Drawing from the teachings of Rabbi Eliyahu Dressler, he directs us to pay particular attention to the moments where we are actively making choices. He calls these bechira points. He writes, just as your spiritual curriculum is composed of a set of soul traits that are particularly relevant to you as an individual, so too do you have a distinctive set of bechira points. Think of those choices that often confront you when you really do experience the possibility of going either way. Do you waver over a second piece of dessert? Is reaching into your purse or wallet to give charity a struggle with an uncertain outcome? Do you know you should call or visit a sick friend, and yet you hesitate and vacillate over actually doing it? Whatever your bechira points may be, they represent not only places of uncertain behavior, but also openings where you have the greatest potential to ascend spiritually. Bechira points those places where there's a question, will I do the right thing? It's not a case of what is the right thing. It's the moment where you know the right thing, and you still might not do it for some reason. Maybe you don't want to expend the effort. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe you think you don't have time, or you tell yourself it won't make a difference. Whatever it is, you know where the right path is, and there's some struggle within you about whether you're going to stay on the right path or not. This spiritual front line is not the same for any two people, of course. For the shoplifter, resisting the urge to take a pack of gum at the checkout counter is a real battle, whereas it wouldn't even occur to the person behind her. And for the person with anger issues, it might be a serious struggle to cool down before responding to an unjust accusation. But for another type of soul, the struggle would be to find her voice and defend herself. So why is this idea useful? Paying attention to those bechira points and applying special effort there is more likely to bring us fruit, rather than focusing on some kind of far-flung perfectionistic goal and feeling defeated. How about moving that front line just a little bit? Through practicing an exercise of awareness and will at those points, we strengthen our ability to freely choose in all circumstances. So how does this work? Let's go back to my scenario. By now, I'm a little more aware of the earlier signs of losing my patience with my family. Instead of noticing it in the middle of the storm or after the fact, maybe I notice it early, when a familiar thought pattern arises in my head. I don't have time for this. Why do I have to do everything? Didn't he say he would take care of that? Aha, there it is. I am in danger of losing my patience. I noted this the last time I did my rain practice, and that thought pattern is a dead giveaway. Now I know what to do. Allow, investigate. What are the accompanying sensations? Clenching jaw, exasperated sigh. What else do I notice? If I'm lucky, once I become aware, I can open up one of those bechira points, engage my toolbox, claim my freedom. Maybe I summon a pre-selected phrase to mind, make time for the ones you love. Maybe I take 2 slow breaths before saying anything. Maybe in that time I remember my compassion for the person I love. Maybe I bring some curiosity. What's really underneath this request? A need for attention? A lack of confidence? Maybe I see I don't need to be fierce with this person to hold my boundary, but I can still hold my boundary. Maybe then I say, with perfect, kind, and unruffled serenity, I am in the middle of something right now. If you need me, you are going to have to wait. I bet you can figure it out yourself. Close, not quite, but close. One tiny victory, one tiny step forward worth noting and savoring, and maybe that spiritual front line moves just a tiny bit. Next time it'll be easier. Before we move back into the flow of the service, I want to give you some time to reflect. So I'm going to do something that might be not wise. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Take a few breaths. Feel your physical body, perhaps the sensation of the chair on your back or your feet on the floor, the breath filling your lungs and moving within you. Take a few minutes to really pay attention to the sounds, the physical sensations of this moment. You might notice hunger, you might notice pain, you might notice a smile on your face, you might notice stray thoughts. Just keep coming back to noticing your physical sensations. And now I'd like to invite you to just think about one pattern in your life that you'd like to change. Maybe you have a particular memory of a particular moment this pattern happened, or maybe it's just sort of knowing the general shape of it. What are the components of this pattern? What happens first? Is there some kind of tipping point or point of no return? What are the external circumstances, the internal steps? And do you notice any places in that pattern where you might have choices that you're making, conscious choices, moments when you know the right action but you struggle to take it? And can you remember a time when you navigated this struggle skillfully? If you can remember such a time, just think about that. What worked? And if you can't think of a time that you overcame your pattern, just have compassion for yourself. You're working on it. Is there any wisdom you can send to your future self if you find yourself in that pattern? Something that you hope you remember, something you hope you do differently, some tiny step you could take to change course. Try to take note of that wise advice that you're sending to your future self. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. In the end, tshuva is not only about stopping bad habits. It's just as much about cultivating the good ones. Exercise, healthy ethical eating practices, acts of kindness and generosity, conscious speech, so many. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel writes in God in Search of Man, a good person is not he who does the right thing, but he who is in the habit of doing the right thing. As we do the earnest work of this season, I want to challenge us all to consider what we move towards and not just what we want to move away from. Between now and the secular New Year, I am going to lay a challenge on the table. I'm going to invite you to join me in attempting to establish a single good habit, a single new good habit between now and January 1st. Maybe it's a moment of gratitude practice or exercise every day. Maybe it's calling a friend every weekend. Maybe it's greeting cashiers or restaurant servers with a smile. Consider your own curriculum, choose accordingly, and after Yom Kippur, you might even want to write yourself a letter with this intention to be open January 1st, 2024. You could send it to me if you want me to hold it for you. I'm going to do it, and I'm very curious to hear how it goes. So if you take me up on this challenge, let me know in January how it's going. And in this year ahead, I want to wish us all that we may be blessed to bring greater awareness to our patterns of thought, behavior, and speech. May we find greater freedom in our choices, not just out of harsh self-control, but also from a place of insight and compassion. May we be strengthened in our movement towards what is good and healthy, and may we be granted the ability to release that which no longer serves us or our world. Amen.